I go to work every day and I take the hits, not because I hate the government, but because I love what's next to me.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Sanctuary in the Jungle. I'm your host, Aaron Nelson. Today we have with us one of the best defense attorneys from our home state of Wisconsin, Joe Bugni. Joe was a federal defender for many years and now works in private practice in Madison. Joe reminds us that oftentimes being the best defender isn't about being the most aggressive or slick, but about connecting with humans. Whether he's asking the judges questions instead of making speeches, writing briefs people look forward to reading, or being brave enough to throw a penalty flag in court, he is the model of a sanctuary builder. He has such a big heart. He gives and gives and gives. He'll also tell us about what it looks like when giving gets to be too much. If you want to learn from the best, keep listening and join me in welcoming attorney Joe Bugni. Well, welcome to Sanctuary in the Jungle. I'm so excited to be here today with my guest, Joe Bugni. Thanks for coming, Bugni.
Oh, thank you very much. This is a great opportunity and great honor.
Oh, this is the third or fourth recording. I can't recall, but I'm super excited. We're going to start rolling them out soon. So happy that you're made the drive up from Madison. Just tell us a little bit about us. I know you're famous in my world. You're famous everywhere here in Wisconsin amongst criminal defense attorneys, but you're an attorney in Madison?
I am. I grew up in Milwaukee, south side of Milwaukee. My dad was a factory worker and then had his own struggles. And my mom was a teacher. Grew up normal middle-class background, was really benefited from public school. I got a great public education at Riverside High School. I was a good football player. Doors were opened. I went to Cornell for undergrad.
Nice.
And then discerned that I was going to be a teacher. That didn't really work out too well. Had a conversion experience, discerned the priesthood for a little bit, and ultimately decided I was supposed to marry my wife, the woman who is my wife, and then went to law school for a little bit, went and clerked for 3 years in the district court in Florida, 2 years on the Court of Appeals in Chicago. Well, we were based in South Bend, but we would go to court in Chicago, and then went to work at the Federal Defenders in Milwaukee.
Yeah, and now you're working with a firm in Madison.
Yep. Yeah. Second best law firm in this state, as we like to say.
Yeah. The top law firm in this state. I remember 1995, I think it was, when Steve Hurley was teaching evidence class, and I thought he was the god of all things legal, and he was the lawyer I wanted to be. And I remember a time after I graduated and came working up here, I was friends with Marcus Berghan, who's a colleague of yours. And he got to work. He works with you now, right?
Oh yeah, it's great.
And he was working at the firm when we graduated. And I think one of the first Christmas presents, you know how everybody's like sending something. I got a Hurley Burlish coffee mug, and I was so excited, so proud to have that. So it's an honor to have you here, somebody from the firm, one of the leaders in our state. So thank you again.
Thank you.
So growing up in Milwaukee, kind of a blue collar background?
Very much, yeah.
How do you think that has influenced you, not only in just your life, but in the legal career?
That's a great question. I wouldn't say it defines me, but it's everything of who you are. You know, like how you relate to people, my expectations of people, the way that I work. You know, my dad was very demanding. He was very, very, I always tell my kids they didn't grow up with Helen and Larry Bugni. And so they were very demanding, both in the way I had charity towards other people, you know, like Mrs. Pearl across the street. We always would shovel her sidewalk or cut her lawn. There was just an expectation of neighborliness. And then also just being able to go without. You know, when you grow up very low middle class, like, you're just kind of used to it. I only had one backpack for all of high school. My dad always made me wear, he was an Army guy, so he always made me wear a field jacket, which are indestructible.
Yeah.
They're also not very cool.
They can go retro occasionally, but generally speaking, not cool.
No, not cool at all. And there was just an expectation that we would work hard. It was bring your lunch pail to work every day, and you didn't complain, and you just knew that you had a job to do.
Yeah.
So
I grew up my father was a mechanic. I worked at the gas station, service station with him. So did my sister. So did my brother. My mom worked there. And so I've always thought that those roots are just who I am, right? It helps me to communicate. It just also helps me to kind of like appreciate where I'm at now in a room in a library filled with books, but it's not necessarily something that my parents came from. I mean, they're high school educated, smart, but they weren't seeking out information from books in the same way that they allowed me to be in that world. Same for you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my family is a little bit different. I've written about this before, so I don't mind sharing it, but my dad came from a wildly successful family. So there used to be a company called Alice Chalmers, and they made tractors and all this stuff. West Allis in Milwaukee is named after that. And so his grandfather was the president of it. And he was like going to be the scion of this very wealthy family and, I'd say successful. He then went to Vietnam and came out with his own wounds. And that sort of, I wouldn't say defined, but it was a big driving factor for the next 20 years that really affected the way that he looked at the world and the way that he dealt with things. So his was more of, he was in a place where he understood that he wanted more for his family, but it was more based upon the principles of virtue, and it was more on discipline. So I always remember he would always tell me stories. That's how he related to me. We had I wouldn't say a difficult relationship, but just your dad's going through his own thing. He's not always there, you know? And so, but he'd always tell me stories and he would inspire me with stories. I remember he would tell me about the guys who had come back from World War II and how they were so thankful to go to college that they would fall asleep, like studying. Because they're like, well, I had just been in the Battle of the Bulge. So what does that matter? And how I needed to appreciate this opportunity for an education. Like nothing was taken for granted.
Yeah.
And he's like, look, nothing's going to be given to you. You got to work. And there was that aspect of it. But then there was also the aspect of he was always honest. I think he told me once that he told a lie in second grade. He got whipped. And that was the last lie he ever told. So he didn't tolerate like honesty. You had to be a man of your word.
This was above all.
That's it. Don't talk back to your mom. It wasn't like a very complex moral code, but it was pretty much, don't talk back to your mom. Don't lie. Work hard. Stop complaining. So
there's a lot of good advice in those four.
Yeah. Yeah. Those virtues. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Did that. And so then from there, you decided you wanted to go to college, right? And are you the oldest in your family?
I am. I had a sister. I was lucky enough. I played football at a pretty high level. And so I thought I'd go to the University of Oshkosh, or I didn't really have high aspirations. I didn't really know, my dad had his stuff going on, but I was good. And so Cornell and like Yale and Penn wanted me to play football because I'd done well in school. And so if you got a certain SAT and you can run block, they're like, hey, come here.
Yeah.
And so that's what sort of drove the college. Like it was just a door that otherwise was not open. Yeah.
That's great. One of our other guests, Professor James Coleman, who's a law professor at Duke right now. He wrote the article Sanctuary in the Jungle.
Nice.
But he was telling us about his opportunity to go to school and to just be around different people than he had been around before that were challenging him in different ways, whether it be the professors or anything else. Did you have a similar experience like that in Cornell?
Oh yeah, Cornell was just tremendous. I mean, there was definitely a part of it where I had a chip on my shoulder, where you're like, I couldn't believe kids had cars, let alone a Mercedes. I had taken the bus my whole life. But it was cool. Like the ideas that I was exposed to, the sense of excellence, but then also that there is no, what's the best way to say this? Talent will rise. That was what I saw. It was like, look, once it comes to the test, it's a meritocracy.
Yeah.
And once you're into that classroom, so long as you're there, you can thrive.
Once you're in the room.
Once you're in the room, it was just, if you could get that door open, and that's what Cornell taught me. It was that and that hard work pays off.
Okay.
There is definitely a sense that you can excel, and that just because you were a public school kid and the other kid went to Phillips Exeter, if he's out drinking every night or getting high, and you keep on showing up in the library at night, you're going to do much better than he will.
Yeah, that's another simple life lesson. Show up.
That's it. Yeah.
Like do the work, show up, right? You said a little bit about a chip on your shoulder, and that's something that I've often thought I too have a high school public education. I went to public college. I went to a public law school. And so it's all been public education. I'm not like some of the guests that I might bring that have wonderful backgrounds, Cornell or Harvard or something like that. And I think I got a chip on my shoulder about it. Sometimes I think it's good. And like most things, it's also got a flip side. There's a little bit of bad. Tell me about your chip.
I think it's mostly growing up poor, like poor or we weren't poor. Like nobody repoed our house. Like, I was a public defender, so I understand poor, but like,
were you going hungry?
No, never. No, it was just more of like, I remember there are two stories. I don't know, maybe you'll cut these, but I remember the first time I realized that people go to the zoo other than on a field trip. I was probably 32 and I took my kids and I was like, what? And it was mind blowing to me. Like one of those, I had to really take stock and I was like, wow.
We can just do this.
You can just do this. Like that was amazing to me. And that there was these avenues open to me that I didn't really understand. And I don't know if it was just a blockage or what it might be. But I remember one time all my friends, I don't remember what year it was, but they were all going to, off on these fancy vacations. And my dad was like, I can take you down to Kenosha and go to the Brat Stop or like whatever it was. And I was like, no, it's all right.
There's a cheese shop there too, right?
Yeah, Mars Cheese Castle. That's where we're going to go to.
And you got really fancy, you'd go to the Jelly Bean Factory.
There you go. That would have been a nice tour. I don't know if it was around in 92 or 93, but I think the chip on the shoulder has always been that. I went to a tier 4 law school, and I think there's always been a sense that I just didn't belong. I didn't really belong at Cornell. I didn't know, I didn't feel I belonged. I think I felt like I did well and got what I could out of it, but I never felt like I belonged. And then I think there was always a sense in the federal courts that I didn't really belong. Like I was always a little
just
bit.
Not good enough.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Which sometimes can be a good thing because you're striving, right? I mean, you're always wanting to do things, but obviously at some point, life is about feeling like you belong.
Yeah, I still don't ever. I mean, as part of his imposter syndrome, part of it is, I think that as a criminal defense attorney, you don't always belong. It's sort of like this a courthouse family. Where the district attorney and the judges, and they're all very comfortable, and you're there with somebody who they're trying to put in prison. And
it's jumping ahead a little bit because I want to talk about community and other things, but I recently had a trial, and it was here in St. Croix County, and it was 5 days, and for whatever reason, I woke up on day 5, and I was going to give my closing that day, and I never done this before. I sent a text out to just 10 non-lawyer friends, just like, I feel so alone. Will somebody just come and watch my closing? And somebody, and a friend of mine did. And even those that didn't, they just gave me some love back. And here I am, been doing this 30 years. It's my community. I've had some successes, and I felt so alone that morning, so deeply alone.
I think it's real. I think when people fail to acknowledge that. And I always try to preemptively do that. Whether it's writing a note or sending my clients who are in jail, or just send them a birthday text, but also just trying to be the most supportive guy. If somebody's in trial, I'll be like, hey, can I get you lunch? Or like, what can I do?
Yeah.
Because we are so alone. Like it's just us at our table with our client. And nobody's cheering for us. Maybe our client's mom. And our client, but that's it. And
that cheering is often rightfully mixed with so much anger.
Yes.
Because it's an appropriate feeling for a lot of people suffering injustice.
Yeah.
But it's not the same support.
That's right. That's right. It's not and there's rarely high fives. Like it's almost more of relief.
Yeah.
It's just that you're just so relieved. Maybe you're not like this, but I don't really relish the wins as much as they're a relief.
Yeah.
It's just
absolutely.
You're like,
I'm relieved to feel relief, but you're right. It's not nearly the same as the crushing loss.
That's it.
I mean, the loss can just crush you.
It crushes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you do feel so alone. I'm glad you reached out to people because it's something I don't do enough of, where even with like my wife and colleagues, sometimes I'll try to say it, but I think some of those moments where you do feel so alone, especially in trial, where you've been taking a beating and you just wished you had somebody there to like, pat you on the butt, or just like, be like, hey, like you did great, or we're going to get through this.
And even for me, I mean, I'm like you. I think we work in a place where there's support. You have a firm, there's other lawyers. We have friends that are lawyers. We have family that know. But at least in that moment, for me, it was important to have somebody in my community, somebody outside of my legal community to just like know what I was. I'm having a hard time articulating it right now. And my friend recently asked, he's like, why'd you send that text out? And other than to just be like, it's important to have the community know what we're doing.
I think that's, I've never done that, but something I would like to do. I did. My mom did come to my first closing.
Well, that's great. But that's, I mean, parents, they're going to love you unconditionally. Sure. They're going to be there all the time, but it's still, even at our age, it still means something, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. As a criminal defense law firm, protecting our clients' privacy is everything. When we set out to upgrade our website, we wanted more than just a site. We needed an all-in-one solution to safeguard client data and make content marketing easier. The last thing we can afford is a data breach or a patchwork of tools that don't talk to each other. That's why we chose Made Daily for our website and secure digital headquarters. With Made Daily, our clients can securely upload documents, complete intake forms, and communicate with us, all inside a private client portal that's encrypted end-to-end. It even links directly to our law practice software, Smokeball, so our team doesn't waste time duplicating files or juggling logins. Everything is connected. Everything stays secure. Made Daily's secure digital headquarters gives us peace of mind, and it gives our clients confidence that their most personal information is protected. Learn more at madedaily.com. Your business, one secure place. So this is, Sanctuary in the Jungle, and I think of what I'm trying to discuss here is like how we can have a sanctuary, but the sanctuary is a place where there's rational decision making, right? There's reason that is used. But that seems so cold. It seems so hard logic, right? And then I want compassion, I want dignity, and I want respect. And in some ways, I feel like that seems so soft. Like those are just the soft things. And so what do you think when you think of, sanctuary in this legal context?
The answer is really twofold. Like one, I think of what a real sanctuary used to be. And I don't know if, the article really touches upon it as much, but sanctuary was actually a biblical concept. And it was the cities that were set up in Deuteronomy where if you did commit a crime against somebody, where before it was, look, the family members are just going to get revenge. You better watch out. We might bring you before a judge, whatever. But you could go to any one of those, I think it was 10 or 12 cities. You're untouchable there.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that continued through the Middle Ages, where they, like, all churches were considered sanctuaries. So, in Hunchback of Notre Dame, that's where Esmeralda goes. And that's where, I think that's her name. And that's where, the Quasimodo is. And so there is this place where the law will not touch you. You are allowed to live out your life, and that we realize that you're untouchable away from that. And so a sanctuary is a place that you're protected. You're protected from the violence, the storms of rage, the feelings of hatred, but also just the concept of revenge. Really, and we might say that, revenge, but it's state-sponsored revenge, where it is retributive justice, right? But within the sanctuary, it says, we will not exert that. So I think there's that first aspect, but then the sanctuary in the jungle, what I've also liked and what you touched upon was the ability to have reason, where the passions of the community, the victims or they have the right to call for justice, right? Or they're very upset. And there's aspects where other people have vested interest in this. And the courts are supposed to be that place where it's detached decision making, where they're not going to be bent to the whims. They're not going to allow those passions to come within the confines of that place. And so that's why I see the courtroom in that same vein, is that you should be protected from all of the winds and the storms that are brewing outside. And this is where we're going to allow justice to be done.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Huh.
Detached decision making is, all of that other stuff, but it really is. We were talking a little bit about stoicism before and how to get into that mindset, but that's really what it is, because we want the best result possible.
That's right.
And you need to somewhat be detached.
Absolutely.
You had a career as a clerk, as a writer, and I want to get into this because you're such a prolific writer and such a wonderful writer, just a beautiful writer. I've read the stuff that you put out in motions, in sentencing memorandums, and your ability to, I think, make a sanctuary on a piece of paper is just remarkable.
Well, thanks.
Yeah. And so what I'm seeing you when you do this is, well, maybe before we get that, I know you've been in front of judges before, obviously, and sometimes you've had to give the same argument or a same type of argument. Immigration, you're in front of the same judge over and over and over, and maybe in federal court, you knew what the judge was going to do. But I've heard tell that you made a judge actually get up and say, I think I need to rethink this. Bugni might be right here.
Yeah. So it's been, just like any public defender, you're gonna throw the same game a few times. You can only do 1,000 bond reviews and really have to, where the judge's strike zone is, and you kind of want to stay within that strike zone. But there are some that the strike zone is so fundamentally flawed that you just have to continue to hammer it unless it benefits your client. And then you're like, oh, judge, that strike zone is that's perfect. Put it right down the middle. The one that you're referring to, I've always believed that you can't capitulate to the injustice of allowing people to be treated differently in the sense of the way that we have with undocumented immigrants. And so when I was young, or much younger, I would have a very heavy docket of undocumented immigrant cases. And so it's 1326. That's where you cut your teeth.
Okay.
And if you got a third of your cases are 1326s, well, you're going to have to be making the same arguments.
And this is in federal court?
This is federal court, yeah, in Milwaukee. And so I knew where the judge's strike zone was, and I would try to always put the ball within that strike zone to be like, well, you said this about that guy, but it's clearly, and that's true of all those other clients. But here, this guy's totally different. Well, every one of my guys I was trying to distinguish that they're totally different. But I also wanted to attack his strike zone because I knew the judge, I'd see him on the street, I know he respected me. And the fundamental concept that he was working under was that this punishment is meant because we need to deter people. And I was like, look, judge, the sentences in Milwaukee, Wisconsin are not going to deter what's happening in Guatemala, what's happening in Ecuador, what's happening in Mexico to drive these people.
Sure.
Here. And you need to
There's no connection.
Yeah. That might be how you justify your sentence to yourself. Because all he's done, or this guy is pretty much all men, was work. They're like, if you're here and you're shoot somebody, it's a much different sentence.
Yeah.
But most of the guys were just picked up because of a traffic stop or something else, and they were just working at a dairy or they're working on the South Side in a restaurant. And I really started to challenge him that the way he was approaching these cases was wrong. And I do it respectfully and on paper and everything. And
and you even now use the word challenge, but the way I heard tell was you'd listen to what the judge said.
Yeah.
And then you'd come back with the judge's strike zone, as you put it, and you'd put it in his world. Yes. And so maybe that's a challenge, maybe that's attack, but I see it as somebody that's like, you're listening. At its core, you were coming there and showing him respect.
Yeah.
You were showing and modeling some way a sanctuary by just simply listening.
Yeah, it's a dialogue. I felt like over the repeated aspect of it was, I didn't think he wanted to be wrong, but I thought that it's so very easy in federal court and maybe even state court to sort of mail it in. You're in the strike zone and you're like, look, buddy, you're getting 3 years. That's the best you could ever get. And my mentor was this guy, Craig Albee, and he was always pushing me to do better than what anybody else could get. He's like, look, here's the normal range. Here's the going rate. Try to cut off a third. That's what you want to do. You always want to cut it down.
You're changing the window then too.
Absolutely, for everybody else.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, Luis got a year and a day. So clearly, Jorge should get, 6 months or whatever it might be. And I looked at it as, Judge, I need to help you see, I know that you're an honest judge. And I really did believe that about him.
Sure.
But I think that you're misunderstanding the way that the whole system is operating. And I remember it was probably later in the Obama administration. And he's like, reading the news now and seeing everything that's going on, I'm almost convinced that Bugni's right and that he's been right the whole time. And I've been, sentencing these, these cases wrongly.
It's remarkable.
And he then went down to I think it was ultimately close to a year and a day. And I remember thinking it felt like a lot of hitting my head against the wall. And there was a great public defender there. Her name was Joanna Perini. And I remember being in the elevator in the federal courthouse, and I think I cried. I was so disheartened by this guy who all he did was work, getting 2 years in prison, whatever it was. But it was just, and I had failed. I felt like that to move the strike zone in that regard, and being in the elevator with her, and then thinking about that when he did kind of come around in his thinking, was like, Eduardo deserved better. Eduardo deserved that insight.
Sure.
But it cost.
Your last guy.
That's it.
Yeah,
but
you're on guy number 20 and you're like, what happened to Alan or Billy or Charlie or David or all these other guys before you get to where you're going?
And he's still doing time.
Yeah.
And he did no less than like this guy. That was one of those big moments in my career where it both formed how I thought about things, but also when you're a repeat customer, you don't have to take where the judge is. And just accept it and be like, well, that's where the strike zone is. You're like, Judge, I think you might be mistaken on this. I think you might be mistaken on this. And, I still do that all the time.
Oh, it's, as you know, my wife, Liesl Nelson, was a longtime public defender. We have the privilege of having her work here with us and all of her brilliance and intelligence and smarts. But she was in one county with one judge for 22 years.
Yeah.
And the things that you can do if you're a repeat customer.
Oh, changes everything.
You can change the culture.
That's
you
right.
can change the environment.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think of it sometimes sanctuary. I have difficulty it's hard for me to figure out when I go into the judge's courtroom, it's his place. This is his place. They create the culture, they create the environment, and I'm coming into that and I'm trying to create a sanctuary, right? And so that's why I find it so remarkable about your writing and your story here is you're going into somebody else's house, somebody else's building, and you're changing the culture.
Yeah, I think that's what every public defender needs to do. And that's why you need public defenders who are there for a long time. You can't just go there for a cup of coffee. And then be like, I'm ready to go.
Yep.
But instead you sit there and you're like, look, I'm here for the long run. And the more you hold yourself with dignity, the more that you are really pushing against the system. Mm-hmm. And there are times, like I'm sure Liesl or any public defender will admit, that you didn't burn down the house in every case because you had the credibility that you had to keep, that's very true. And those are hard decisions you have to make. But you're creating that sanctuary that you're standing up there time and time again to say, Judge, you're reading the Bail Reform Act wrong. Judge, you're not actually seeing the way the sentencing should be. And sometimes it hurts because you're, getting told no over and over again, but you have to be creative and you have to keep on pounding the stone. I don't know if that's in the books of the stone. The Pound the Stone has been one of my favorite. Do you know that analogy?
I could tell me about it.
It just comes from the Stonecutter's Credo, which is something I've held on to when I was a public defender, where I won't try to mimic the poem. It's just too beautiful. But it's the concept that the first 99 blows that the stonecutter delivers aren't what splits the rock, and the 100th is. But the 100th is no more effective than the first 99, and it's just as necessary. All of those, but you have to take the fact that you're showing up every day to hit this block, and one day it will break.
Yeah.
It will break.
The problem, I mean, that you obviously recognized in the elevator in that moment was you're so thankful that you had the 100th strike and you got to change it for the person that was the beneficiary of the 100th strike and the 101st and the 102nd.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about strikes. We're talking about 99 human beings.
Absolutely.
Right?
Oh, it's so hard. It's so hard. But you hold out the hope that the 91st is going to be a little bit better than the 90th, and it's a little bit better and it's a little bit better. And yeah, you want to change it in some fundamental ways, but we live in a broken justice system.
Yeah. Part of both in those sentencing stories that I've heard and in your writings, it seems as if, the philosophical concept is of other minds that I'm sure you're thinking about what the listener is going to think.
Yeah.
But that at its core is respect and dignity that you're showing to the listener, that you're showing to the judge in this case, that you're like, I know you're worried about X.
Yes.
I know you're worried about Y. I know you're worried about Z. And that's what I see you do in your writing so often. Is that something you learned from a particular place over time, the crucible of excellence that just got you there?
Oh, that's a great question. I haven't really reflected upon it. I think Craig Albee was the one who really, he was the ultimate foil. He would often call me on my BS, but he also would be like, you don't need all this. There's a guy, John Campion, Emma's dad. I remember he told me reading Albee's writing was such a paradigm shift that here was a guy who didn't go with the normal constructs that everybody else puts in their sentencing memo. It's a bunch of fluff and Gall says this, and you should know this about, like da-da-da. It's just blah, blah, blah.
Here's what Gallion says.
That's what Gallion says. And you have all these 5 factors, da-da-da, judge probation. Is that Albs would tell you to zero in on the issue that mattered most. And what I was able to do with him and with being a repeat player is like, Judge, you don't care about specific deterrence. You don't care here about this. What you care about is retribution. And this is what you're going to be struggling with on this case. Let me talk about that because that's what I think you're going to be dialed into. And then I would just try to pitch right to that issue, and it allowed me to cut down everything else. But as to I think your core question, I've always approached all writing, and I think hopefully my whole life, from a sense of humility, in that it's not about me. Right? Like this isn't for me to write this great piece of work that I'm like, look
how clever Joe is.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Like my mom to read it and she's like, oh, honey, you're doing such a great job. That M dash is so great. Instead, it's like, is this going to be persuasive? Is this going to catch the fish that I need caught? Because somebody's life is on the line. And it can't be about my ego. It can't be about what I think is really great. It has to be about what's persuasive. And when you look at writing and all advocacy from a place of humility, it quickly allows it to be framed in probably the most creative way possible, because the creativity is to say, I want to make sure I get the fish. It's not that I feel good in the fishing. And once you take yourself outside of that and you put yourself in the shoes of all that matters is what Eduardo gets, all that matters is what happens here.
Sure.
Then it really is not about you.
And there's a fine distinction there, because in your writing that I've read, it's very personal.
Yeah.
Your writing is very, here's the process I've gone through, Judge. Here's how I've come to know this person.
Yeah.
Here's what I've worried about. Here's all of the things that I've done. I mean, the sentencing memo I recently read in prep for this on your client who was supposed to get 30 years and she got 3 years and all of those guidelines, but it was very much personal from Joe's eyes, but it wasn't about Joe.
Yeah.
I don't know how you did that.
That was, so she had a great story that you could tell. Anytime you can talk about your client swimming through a river of alligators to stop being a victim of genocide, you got a pretty good lead. It was good material to work with. But I think part of it was,
and that's not, you're not just making that up. That's like a true story. That's
true
what
story.
happened to her.
Yeah. No, I love that woman. Like you wouldn't believe. Like she is one of my favorite clients. She texts and calls and she's excellent. No, that was a true story. But part of it was getting to really know her. And that takes, there's a great public defender, longtime public defender, Dee Dee Watson. And she would always say, you got to rock with your clients. And I used to try to go, like, I wouldn't say every Friday afternoon, but most Friday afternoons, I just go to the jail and just sit with people and just talk to them about what, how's it going? They'd be like, oh, is it bad news? I'm like, no, I'm just seeing how you're doing, checking in. And once you understand a person, there's a great line in a book called Brideshead Revisited. It says, to know all is to forgive all. And that line has always stuck with me, because once you know all, and what it means by that is, like, once you see it through their eyes, once you know all the circumstances of what they were dealing with, you kind of forgive. You can understand a little bit more. Now that falls apart with a sociopath, but for most of our clients, to know how hard they were working at sobriety, and sobriety is an easy one, but like, I've always felt that judges get it wrong when they focus on the slip up 9 months into like their probation. And I'm like, no, judge, there were 269 days that he woke up and he did exactly what we wanted him to do.
Absolutely.
But then when they closed down the Quick Trip, and when his car broke down, and when, he found out that, like, his fiance was cheating on him, it was too much. And we can't get mad at him for the 270th day. We're disappointed.
Yeah.
And we want to help him with that. But man, that's a lot of factors. Let's talk about those 269 days.
And you, at least when I've read your stuff, it's very much of I know you're worried about this 270th day, and you have every reason to be worried about this. These are important things. Yeah. But also, let me tell you about this. Yeah. And so it's coming from this almost non-judgmental way. Yeah. I don't blame you for thinking that. Yeah. But maybe you didn't know all and see all. Let me tell you some of that other stuff that's missing, which is this, I kind of almost, it's a tone of humility, because you clearly know more than the listener. Yeah. You know more than the decision maker, but you're telling it to them in a way that I think allows them to hear it or listen to it.
And I think that's part of it, is just, it's one, the humility to say, like, I know that he or she is really going to try to give an honest judgment here, right? Sometimes I don't know if that's always the case, but I tend to think that is. But then it's also widening the aperture. It's not trying to hide from the bad fact, right? Like you can't hide from the bad. Alves was always big on that. Like, look, you just got to embrace it. And there's a great line, some English barristers, like, grab your nettles. And it just means, like, you got to grab the thorns, rather than letting them bristle against you, and then quickly pivoting, like, and not doing it in like a weird way. You're like, I know he shot him, but let's just talk about everything.
Sure.
Like, hey, I think, Judge, you're really getting caught up on this dead body. Instead, you really want to get caught up on, Judge, this is what would bother you. You sentenced, I had one where I was like, you sentenced a person with an almost identical facts in another case, right? And I know that you know that you remember that case. Yeah. It's the same case, right? You're going to want to give her the same sentence because you like to treat like alike. That's exactly it. You just
There's some value in consistency.
Absolutely. But you didn't know everything you should have known to give that woman 48 months. And I know you, Judge. You are a very good judge. And had you known these factors, you might have given her less. And you're going to want to say, well, I wouldn't have given her less because of that. But you often give less. Those factors are actually present in my client's case.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. And so, like, that was how I got much less on that case.
Yeah. So you're not attacking this decision. You're pulling the other ones down.
Yeah,
right?
That's it. Yeah.
And to even it out. Your quote about the nettles, tell me that again.
Yeah. Grab your nettles.
Grab your nettles. Or as the modern day poet that I tend to refer to, Eminem.
Yeah.
I think in is it 8 Mile? He says something, I have it written on the board, during his last rap battle, and when he's winning that, he says, I know everything he's got to say against me. Yeah. That's I know what you're going to do to attack me. I know what you're worried about. I know I have some nettles, and you're going to try to exploit those. But you just got to deal with it, right? Yeah. Because we've all got nettles.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not getting there if we don't. And I think also, that comes down to all advocacy, but you can't run from them or think that the judge is going to forget. Like, that's an insult to their intelligence.
Sure.
Right? I'd say the same standard is an insult to the other side not to take on their hardest argument. Like I tend to always, there was a guy, Dan Graber, he was the best U.S. attorney. And he just beat me up left and right. He would just like, he would outwork, I don't think he outworked me, but he would definitely fight hard. And he was when I feared going against the most. And I always prepared every case like I was going against Graber. And so I was just like, look, these are my real, I'm not going to think that I can, like just skip over something. I'm not going to pretend like that won't be objected to. I need to prepare for that.
Yeah. How did you get to know the judges like that so you could read that? Is that just, again, the value of being in the same, culture and environment on a daily basis or on a weekly or monthly basis through the public defender, or there's some other magic that you had?
So a lot of it was by just the virtue of the job, right? I was also really lucky to be the head of the federal defender. And so like everyone would come back and complain. But I'm also like a courthouse junkie. Like I really love to watch good advocates. So, when a great lawyer would come to town, it's like when Steve Hurley came to Milwaukee, I'm watching Steve Hurley. I want to see how Steve Hurley does it. I'm like, oh, that's so smooth. And I tend to also be a thief where,
well, we are all thieves. You can't get better in this business without being a thief.
You can't. So Marcus Berghan, who you referenced, a friend of yours, and he's a great lawyer. I would always steal his sentencing memos. I'm like, oh, that's clever. Oh, well done, Marcus.
Yeah.
Dean Strang, I took from everybody. So I would watch a lot. And then I also tried to keep an eye on the docket where I'd be like, that case seems a little bit just like mine, or I know what's going on. Let me see how the judge reacts to that or what he's going for with this. So I had a good finger on the pulse, both with being in court, often, and then also just going to watch. And I really enjoyed watching other advocates. I think, you not just steal from what you see in the paper, but like also just the little things like, Judge, I just want to quibble. If I can just quibble with one point that you made. It's a disarming.
Great phrase.
Yeah, it's a great phrase. I didn't come up with it.
Who's gonna be like, sure, I guess. Yeah. No quibbling here.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Judge, I agree with almost everything you said, but I just gotta quibble with one little piece. He's like, little? That was the whole thing. That was my whole point. Well, when you phrase it that way, Your Honor. And also, I do this thing that I don't think I didn't invent it clearly, but I don't know who I stole it from. But I often ask the judge, rather than give a speech, I always say, Judge, I can give a speech, but nobody here wants to sit here and have me drone on about things that don't matter. Like, what are you struggling with in this sentence? I've given you, 20 pages of documents, all these letters. What are you really struggling with? You know what my ask is? And oftentimes the judge will then tell me. Hey,
well, do they engage in that? Because I heard you did that in a recent case that Professor Levine was bragging about your presentation and how you handled that, and she pointed that out exactly, that you asked this question. And when I heard her tell that story, I thought, oh my gosh, but what if the judge doesn't engage?
I've never had a judge not engage.
Well, how do you set that up?
I just tell the judge, I'm prepared to give you a very long speech that I think is quite good, but it's very clever, and but it probably is going to hit all the marks. I know that you've read everything and you've come in here kind of with a zone. You don't know exactly what sentence you're going to give, but there are points that you're struggling with. I might hit those, but I also might just like give a speech on something that you've already thought or you also think is just ridiculous. I want to avoid the ridiculous and I want to avoid the redundant. What are you really struggling with in this? And that's just usually how I set it up. I don't always say the ridiculous and redundant, but something quick to it. And I think also that if you give the judges the benefit of a very good sentencing memo, it shows that you've already framed what you're trying to do. Yeah. And it also allows them to give you good insight into what they're really thinking.
Yeah. And you're showing them dignity and respect.
Yeah.
You're like, you're the decision maker, and I want to make sure that I'm listening to you or being able to address those things. So it's a fairness, it's a respect.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of stuff packaged into that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Thanks.
No, I'm definitely stealing that. Consider me a thief.
All right.
So for it's sanctuary. We often think of as criminal defense attorneys. I should just say back up. As criminal defense attorneys, we often think of trials.
Yeah.
Trial. And we've been talking a lot about sentencing and about judges who are the decision maker. For me, there are a lot of trials, and it's a totally different setup to get a sanctuary in front of a jury, I think, than to go into the court and get sanctuary from a judge.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Tell me about that. What do you think about that?
I think of it almost twofold. Like, one, I'm a big process guy for trials. I think that oftentimes it is theatrical. We all know that, right? Like, you're lying to yourself if you don't think it is. But it's a process where the real trial has happened weeks or months beforehand, when you've set up everything, you're developing all that so that you can, with the freedom, perform and get to where you need to be with that. Because otherwise, I think younger lawyers are often, they're scrambling at the last minute. They're worrying about emotion eliminated. That doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Like, instead, like,
sure,
they should be worrying about the cross. But I think there's also an aspect of, the jurors want to respect what you're doing, and they know that you're respecting them from your opening statement or your voir dire, through your opening statement, through the crosses. I tend to be very tight on my cross. I mimic what Albie drilled into me. And so my chapters are very tight. I'm getting in, getting out. I always mock the idea of asynchronistic cross-examination, because I was like, well, I don't know if you need to give it such a formal name. It just means an effective cross-examination. Like, I just want to go ask the questions I want to get out, but I don't waste their time with a lot of, filler. I get in, I get out, I have what I want. And I think the jury, at least I've gotten the feedback that when I'm speaking, the jury is actually like, they all sit up. They're like, okay, let me see. He's really going to do something here. And sometimes it'll be just even the way that I try to respect the jury's time with some of my objections. Like, I tend to be like, Judge, we stipulate to this, or whatever it might be, like those aspects of it. But when it comes to the sanctuary and the jungle aspect of how a jury plays that, I think it's the ultimate arbiter. And it's what sets our criminal justice system apart. I know Steve Meyer, but he used to tell the story of, like, the jury system has been dying. And there's very few lawyers who are still willing to do it because it's hard and they're afraid and it's humiliating and it's costly, et cetera, right? But it's really where you're able to get 12 individuals from all walks of life to come here and to say, for this, I'm willing to take away this person's good name. And there's a great line by Kingston Brewster. He used to be the president of Yale. I think he was like Secretary of State. It's actually on his tombstone in New Haven. Where he says, like, I used to have it written out on a piece of paper above my screen at the Federal Defender. I was like, the presumption of innocence is nothing more and nothing less than assuming the best in the stranger.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I was like, oh, like, because you don't know, like, it's no longer like small town where we know Johnny,
Yeah.
But we assume the best.
Literally the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly. And it's allowing the jury to do that, to put themselves, I know we're not allowed to say in their shoes, but
I think we are. We can have that discussion later.
I love it. I will steal that. But that's where I see that sanctuary, is that it is allowing for assuming the best within the stranger and assuming goodwill towards him. Am I convinced enough to take away his good name and his liberty?
Yeah.
And once you have, I think you would probably subscribe to the same theory, but, like, there is always the play towards innocence in a trial. I have to show that they're innocent. That's what, the burden sometimes you're taking on, right? But there's always, you're going towards that. But then there's also the secondary one of reasonable doubt and trying to educate the jury of to what is to reasonable doubt. And that search for truth and allowing as the waves, go between them, because their intention never, but there is evidence that goes towards either one, that you're going towards. So I think that's where the sanctuary is for me within that jury system, is enforcing the very best of who we are as a society, that we insist upon assuming the best in the stranger, and that we refuse to take away their liberty unless we are convinced, so far beyond a reasonable doubt, with the same certainty we would in our own affairs.
Yeah, no, exactly. One of my favorite things to stand up in front of a jury and talk about in that sense in closing is, here you're required to give somebody the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
And wouldn't that be a great way to live your life all the time? Wouldn't that be just wonderful if we could, and we can't?
Yeah.
I get it. We're out there in the jungle, out there in that world. We might get hurt.
Yeah.
This might happen. We can't always give everybody the benefit of the doubt. But here, you're required to be your best.
Yeah.
You're required to do that, right? That's I think, just something that, again, gets them to aspire to be that, right?
Absolutely. No, yeah. I think I'm always about the aspiring of, you looked me in your eye and in the eye and you promised me that you would do this. And I'm holding you to that oath.
Sure. There's some of that too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So for me, when I think of sanctuary with a judge and sanctuary with a jury, again, I just thought of this now, is like with my struggles with a judge, is I'm punching up.
Yeah.
And I've got a real strong anti-authority, and I can get angry at the power if they're not listening. And so sometimes I just scream louder.
Yeah.
And that's just not effective, right? But juries, I never, they are more powerful. They're all, but I don't, they're my dad at the gas station. They're they're the blue collar people. They're the everyday people that haven't been tainted by law school.
That's it.
And so I feel like I can't, it's not, I don't want to say like I'm punching down like they're beneath me, but I just feel like it's a much easier way. I feel more relaxed talking to them than I do talking to somebody that I feel like is above me. Does that make any sense?
No, it does. I don't know if I struggle with that as much. I tend to talk, this is like the best compliment I've gotten about the way I am in trial is I talk like I'm just at a bar. And but that's all the way I talk to a judge. I
think that that's what I feel like in your writing.
Yeah.
Like your writing is very colloquial but it's very easy to read.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, this is going to be dense. I got to do some analysis. You get carried away by the story.
That's it. Yeah. So I try to, look at everybody as equals and not in like that I can pull rank on anybody, but just we're all human beings trying to make the very best decisions in our own brokenness.
Yeah.
Like we are all broken. The judge is broken. I'm broken. The prosecutor's broken.
We're all flawed.
We're all flawed. Yeah.
So in the trial, and I know to me, I've found, and maybe it's just where I'm at in my career, that they're longer trials.
Yeah.
But I almost wonder if there's not an advantage to that too, because you think so.
Oh yeah,
absolutely,
absolutely,
right?
man.
Because for me, at least sanctuary, it's like when we're in trial, like the judge is on his best behavior.
Yeah.
The DA is on his best behavior. Everybody is there on their best behavior. And then the jury's coming in to my world, even though it's not my courthouse, I can all of a sudden, like, I have more influence on it. And we're all behaving, I think, as best as we can. Now, that bar might be different for for the judge and the prosecutor and me, but it just, as you said, it kind of raises everybody up in some way that we can model it over time.
Yeah. I think there's also the aspect, if you're a jerk, you can fake it for a day or two.
Yes.
But the jury's not going to, they can tell.
3 days. Yeah.
Yeah.
We know the real Joe Bugni.
That's exactly it. They know, and hopefully they like me because I'm being me. It's not like these fake eras where they're like, oh, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm so thankful you were here. Or like that they overexerted. They know that. I pour water for anybody. Right. They're seeing me pour the water for the CSO or this courtroom security officer or my client. And they see me being respectful or holding the door, and they know that that's just me. And so when I'm making those representations, it's part of that. And I think Jim Shello used to always say that he loved a long jury trial because they got to know his sense of humor. And they got to know who he was, and they got a sense of it. Yeah. They appreciated it.
And I think it does. If you're credible, you're more likely to be appreciated for your credibility over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
Because I think certainly as criminal defense attorneys, sometimes we come in to giving us the side eye, might be a little critical of us just because they don't know any better.
Yeah. Well, I think too, like in a longer jury trial, I remember like I had one where too, like where you're cracking jokes about stuff that happened beforehand. Like I remember one, I was like, we're all there. When I impeached him on this, and yes, I did hope that this would have happened. We all know it didn't. Whatever it was, or another one.
You could tell stories about a shared experience.
That's it.
A shared experience bonds you. You get to be their guide. You get to be their mentor.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Or you just, I'm big on visuals and for props. And so you have those within the trial that you're like, look, you guys remember this. Like I had it, you felt it, they felt it, and we passed it around.
Yeah.
What would he have seen in that? There were 30 of these dials. Was he looking to see if that was 3.4? Did he care?
Yeah.
No, it's 20 degrees below zero in the middle of, Western Wisconsin. He's just up there pencil whipping it because that's what every one of us would have done. Because that's what every reasonable person does at 2 a.m. on the top of the 7th floor of a factory. And that's just okay because it was only a problem if it went to 0 or if it went to 10, and you could eyeball that in a second. That's sort of like, that's just giving the jury the credibility of like, you're just gonna be a reasonable guy, just like my dad, just like anybody else. I always try to think of my dad on the jury.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So let me ask you about some clients or some stories if you're comfortable sharing some of that.
Sure, yeah.
I know you had represented somebody, I think, all the way through where you were a woman who you were trying to present her defense because of the past abuse that she'd suffered.
Sure.
Right. And you were not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And to me, somewhat about a sanctuary is also about the following the rule of law. And the rule of law is to just, let us try to tell our story. Can you tell us about how that worked in the rule of law in that story about getting your backstory of your client in?
Yeah, I think actually to give the story justice is to give Craig Albee his due. He would always say that when you're young, no good research goes to waste. Like go down every rabbit trail. You're never going to regret it. You might regret it in the moment, but you will always have that research in your mind. So you'll remember Iowa v. Knowles 20 years later because you became a master of Iowa v. Knowles only to find out your client did get arrested and it doesn't apply at all. And so I had a case with this client who he was in Boscobel prison. And I know this is a long story, but it's pretty good. And so he's in Boscobel prison, and I was too young to look up whether or not Boscobel had both a general population as well as a supermax. And this is, 15, 20 years ago. And so he had kept on writing letters to the Kenosha district attorney threatening them. So he'd get brought out of prison, go to county jail. And he's like, this is amazing. All my buddies are here. I love it. So he did it once. He got probation or concurrent time. He gets back to Boscobel. He's like, this sucks. I want to go back to Kenosha. So he writes another letter. And I get him. And he's like, look, man. He's like, you can just get a free trial out of me. I don't care. I'm doing 67 years. Go for it, kid. And I was like, all right, cool. Let's get ready for this trial that I can never win because you gave a confession and all this stuff, right? And I've always thought you should never give up. Like the game that's in front of you is not the game that you have to play, right? Like you can actually redefine the rules. And so I always try to be as creative as possible. And so there I was like, what if he had to? And I'm big on like taking walks and processing, and it's never the first idea, the second idea. It's usually the 28th that's actually any good. And even then that might not be a good idea, but it's one you can run with. And so I said, I'm going to raise the necessity defense because the conditions of Supermax are so bad that it was going to deteriorate his mental health to such an extent that the harm was greater than what he had done. Right. And so I went back.
He needed a break.
He needed a break because, and it was right after Judge Crabb had kind of shut down Boscobel and said, like, this is how terrible it is. It's an Eighth Amendment violation. And you have the right to avoid an Eighth Amendment violation, whether it's being eaten, served to bears or being in Boscobel. So I wrote up this great brief, did all the research. I was like, I learned all about the defenses and all these other things. And So I wrote it up, and I'd gone out to the jail to visit my client. By then they knew not to put him in Kenosha County. They put him somewhere else. But I did this great job for him. And I'm getting ready to file. I don't remember the deadline, right? But it's probably like a Friday or maybe it's a Monday. And I got to file. I'm going over the affidavit, and I'm like, okay, this is true. All this is true. I was like, and the lights are always on. He's like, man, you can never sleep. And I went out off of like the Eighth Amendment compilation, all the things that they were complaining about. I was like,
sure.
And it's always buzzing. He's like, I can hear it right now. and I go through all of the things that they had complained about. I was like, and you never saw another, human being. He's like, man, I would never see anybody except like when I'm playing spades, maybe like playing a little ball. And I was like, oh, he's delusional. And so I went through and asked another question. I was like, so you're always eating alone in your cell? And he's like, I'm maybe like, no, why would I eat alone? Like, I mean, I got my crew. And I was like, but you're in the, what are you talking about? And I'm still like totally lost. Now, we had gone over this defense and this affidavit many a time. So it wasn't like he didn't know where it was going. And I'm like, Mr. Benjamin, like you're in this is part of what it was in the Supermax. He's like, Supermax? He's like, man, I'm on the GP side. And so I was like, but our whole defense is that you're in the Supermax. And he's like, oh man, you would have got blown up. And so he
took it pretty well.
He took it pretty well. So I was like, I wrote a 40-page brief. I've been here every weekend for like my wife's gonna leave me. He's like, oh man, I don't know what to tell you. I was like, we have gone over this. He's like, I just wasn't paying attention. You were so into it. so I couldn't file that, right? But I always held on to it.
Those seeds get planted.
Yeah. And so many years later, I had a young woman. It was a tragic case. She had been beaten by her boyfriend just terribly. She's giving me permission to use her name. So Marjorie, I got her case and I got to know her and I heard the story and they were offering her, I think it was 7 and they wouldn't, it was a mandatory minimum because she had robbed a couple places with a gun because her boyfriend had beaten her so badly and just said like, you gotta give me this money, this fake payback. I got into her phone and I couldn't believe the text messages and the story of what the abuse that she had suffered, both the physical, the psychological, the sexual abuse was just horrific. And I took it as an opportunity to raise the battered women's defense. But the problem was federal court, you're not allowed that. Like there was a circuit split on whether it was allowed in federal court. And so I think 3 circuits had gone one way, 3 circuits had gone the other way, and the 7th Circuit had punted. So the 7th Circuit had said it was, I think it maybe even said it was closed. It was closed off.
I thought, they said it was closed. Like there was a previous case that tied your judge down.
Yeah. Yeah. So I used that as an opportunity to develop the defense. And then I ended up, the judge said, no, I'm not going to revisit it. I can't overrule the 7th Circuit. Sentenced her, which I thought was, he gave her 30 months. And then I did the appeal. It was great. It was a great experience. I worked with a clinic that they wouldn't give me an amicus brief because they were sure I was going to lose. And they thought that it would ruin the law for other cases.
Oh, this is the clinic out of Pennsylvania?
Yeah. And they, and so then I got a buddy of mine, this lawyer named Ryan Walsh, who works at this firm, Eimer Stahl. And he's a great writer, appellate lawyer. And he's always willing to like go and fight for the underdog. Like he's one of the greatest human beings. So he wrote an amicus for me and a local group signed off on it. And we went for the 7th Circuit and it was great. Like Alves is just the tremendous mentor he is, that my wife had a baby like 4 days before oral argument. Like, like it was a little bit like, you never know when a baby's going to come.
Yeah.
And so he took over and argued the case and we won and she was able to stay in the country. She had immigration consequences too, got time served. In fact, she was at my house listening to the oral argument when we had it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And but it was tremendous. But that case actually, so I'll be candid. It's less about that case than it was the relationship with her. I remember moving her into her apartment when she got out of jail. And we were going through her boxes because she had been in the abusive relationship and then gotten arrested, and all her stuff got boxed up by her family, and they moved it out of the apartment with the guy. And I'm there in her kitchen and we're unpacking, and she takes out a blouse that still is bloodstained from the beatings. And just holding her and realizing, like, just these are the horrors that, people want to think of battered women syndrome in a very analytical sense. They're like, oh, it happens over there. And of course, but when you're holding the blouse, when you're seeing the pictures, when you know what happened to this woman, it takes on a whole new gravity. And it's really like why we fight so hard.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that you're so involved with your clients, right?
Yeah.
I know that that's wonderful.
Yeah.
There are times, at least for me, that sometimes I can do that and sometimes I can't.
Yeah.
And where those boundaries should be vary depending upon where I'm at and what's going on. How have you navigated that? Because I know you've held blouses in their house. You've had clients come live with you. You've spoken at their weddings. You've spoken at their funerals. You've been there for the birth of their children. How do you manage all of that and still be this super lawyer that you are? Or is that why you're the super lawyer that you are?
No, I'm not well. I mean, to be honest, like I don't have the boundaries down really well. I think there's a part of me that if I hadn't gotten married, I would have been a priest, and I would have been just a very humble, probably would have been like a Franciscan priest and just served in the inner city of Milwaukee. And that's just kind of like my personality. I tend to think that the Lord has given me the grace to have the victories I've had more to feed my ego than it has been to like what is truly important to me. And so like the boundaries are like the relationships are what endure. And that's what I really think. At the end of the day, nobody remembers the best brief. Nobody remembers those things. But the people remember like how I love them. And the relationships are really formed in a sense that I've always tried to, there are people I haven't been able to connect with. That does happen. But I always try to love people as the other. Like I want to will their good. And I want to do their good, that they're not a means to my end. And that's the thing I struggle with in private practice with charging them money. Like before public defender, I was always completely altruistic. But the boundaries, I try to always treat them as other. And so I see them struggling with, I've been richly blessed materially. So like if somebody needed money or something on their books, like it wasn't a huge thing to me. And even when I didn't make much money, we definitely went paycheck to paycheck at the public defender. I always knew we were way better off than the guy who was, living in his mom's garage.
Sure.
As far as the other sacrifices go, I tend to have always approached it as though it was my son or my sister or whoever it was. And my dad, I alluded to it before, but like his own struggles, he could have been out on the street if it weren't for my mom. And so I can always see within my clients, my own father, he's a felon. And so like, how would I have wanted someone to treat him and what that would have done? And I think you've seen this, I know you've seen this, is that the difference between success and sometimes a relapse or whatever it might be is often the smallest of acts.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And so like I would early on in my career, I would always give my clients I still give it to them, but I would always give them my personal cell. And I still remember like Joey Coleman and what was his name? I can't remember his name. I can see his face right now. Victor. I'd be like, every night I'd be like, man, you can do it. Don't smoke weed tonight. Like just watching Netflix or whatever, play some video games, blah, blah, blah. Or Joey, I'm so proud of you. Like this is day 14 or whatever it might be. And I still try to, like, if I'm driving here, I'll just call a client and just, try to talk to them and everything like that. And my kids have gone to, when the client lived with us, then they have, of course, my kids saw him. But I think my kids have always seen my clients as an extension of our life. Yeah. And so I just try to look at them as people that the Lord has put in my life to love.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Does that overwhelm you at times?
Yeah. Totally does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really hard. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because I've done it to a micro level of what you're talking about, and it can just be overwhelming, especially in the after.
Yeah.
Is sometimes easier than the during, because
Yeah.
at least to me, like I represented a client a couple of years ago, innocent, accused of his child died,
Yeah.
and it was a medical issue.
Yeah.
And he was found not guilty,
Yeah.
and it was a wonderful thing. But during that, I was I didn't have the capacity sometimes to make promises. Not that we should make promises, but to just provide some of the relief that I think he needed and he wanted. And I didn't blame him for needing it or wanting it. But in that moment, I was just like, I can't carry that promise. It would just crush me. I need to deliver the promise, but I couldn't carry it. And it's something that still, even to this day, like bothers me about myself that I couldn't do. But I also know rationally, like, we can't do that. Is there a distinction between the during and the after?
I mean, I'm sure there's a distinction. I think, like it is crushing at times. I mean, I had a nervous breakdown. I think you're going to go and ask me about that later on. But I think when I'm carrying it in the midst of it, I try to be as honest with people. I often try to take walks with all my clients. Okay. So I don't want to meet in a conference room or a sterile office. I just go for a walk around Madison. And we just process as human beings. I make most of my clients read. I give them like a reading list of things that they need to read to help them.
Do they follow up?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost all of them. Yeah.
That's great.
I usually tell them I'm going to do a terrible job if they don't do it. I can't guarantee what's going to happen if you don't read Chop Wood, Carry Water. But that's actually one of the ones I make them read. I actually always start with Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm like, look, you just got to read the first 80 pages. And almost to a T, everybody's like, man, if you can live through that with a positive attitude, I got this.
Yeah, yeah.
And and then from there, it's either Chop Wood, Carry Water or The Rhythm of Life. And then I just go like, we usually talk about the books and everything else. But there is a distinction. I think sometimes you're right. Like it depending on different times in my career, it's so overwhelming. And I can't do it. I also try to really empower the people around me to have that relationship. And so I try to break down the boundaries between intern or secretary or paralegal and lawyer and client so that they too can share in that. And sometimes they really need to hear from Trinity. Yeah. Or the, you've been really blessed with Mac and Emma. Both of them walked with clients just as my surrogate. And they were able to do that. But it can be overwhelming. I have failed, of course, with some people where I really wished, I carry deep within me, my clients who've killed themselves. Like those are wounds that like, you're just like, wow, those are really hard.
Yeah. I mean, I think we started today, you showed me a quote from your phone.
Yeah.
You know, that we all carry within us a cemetery that we go to pray with some regret and bitterness about our failures or when we were less than. I'm sure it was more poetically put than I just said, but that's something you carry with you?
Oh, absolutely. I think every lawyer does. I know Jessa, before she passed, I thought some of our best conversations, and I think most lawyers, if they're honest, I mean, some will go and self-medicate to it, right? Like that's the way you numb yourself to it. But there are times where you need to revisit it, the quote. I can't remember exactly it is right now. But you're going to have those times that they're so hurtful, where you failed your client and you either the jury got it wrong, the judge got it wrong. You don't know why it is, but those break you, but you got to get up. Like the next, you got another round and just sometimes as a public defender, your guy gets 30 years and then, an hour later you got to go and do a DPA.
Yeah. You don't want to treat your clients as ends to your means, objects absolutely. Or the 80th strike when we need 100.
Yeah.
But sometimes the benefit is like my client tomorrow doesn't care that I lost today. He needs me He needs me now.
That's it.
I don't have time to mope. I don't have time to pout. I don't have time to like, there's some self-reflection, but it's all about get up on your feet. You got to get back in there.
That's it, man. I think about it as a relief pitcher in baseball. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, look, I just got, you got to have or a cornerback in football. Like, you got to have the shortest memory possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you also have it deep down inside. And some of those hurt worse than others. I told the client just when I was at the coffee shop down here, I was like, look, I'll wipe out your fee. He's in arrears. But I was like, but you got to let me take you out for dinner because I feel like both of us need to process this.
Sure.
Like, and just have that. So I do think that there is, to get back to your question, there is an aspect of all of us that we have such secondary trauma and so many wounds that we have to revisit them. Otherwise, we often also don't grow from them. Like you grow from your wounds where you can go back to them and say like, I wish I was better on that. Or I often am like, well, I'm going to do a different process for this.
Yeah.
Or I could have prepared better. I should never have assumed this. And I try to do a post-mortem for almost every failure. But there are certain wounds where like Gary Blair, I think about Gary Blair probably once a month. And that is like the true motivation. Yeah.
I mean, the scars are going to be there, but if you don't work them, you're going to have less mobility.
Totally. You're not totally calloused.
Yeah. And you can't do that. You mentioned Jessa, a friend of both of ours. In 2020, there was an award at Wachtel named after her and Donna Kukler and Kathy Stilling. And at the time, I'd given Jessa a book, and the book I gave her was this book, Dictionary of the Undoing by John Freeman, and she just passed here in early August. There's a quote in here that I want to read to you. Yeah. It's at the end. It says, "As we arrow through our days, the best part of that experience can be removed from us by aerodynamics. It is almost as hard to carry hope as it is to carry pain. Experience so often tells us to let hope go. It is difficult to ferry love through a world that takes such pleasure in the vicious denial of it to people considered less than."
Yeah.
That there where it says, it is almost as hard to carry hope and the difficulty of ferrying love through this world. And so often that's what I think of as is us. Is that's to me the weight of what we do is we're carrying hope not only for ourselves, but we're carrying somebody else's hope.
Yes.
And oh shit, Joe.
Yeah.
There are times that I'm just like, man, I don't know if I can carry that.
Yeah.
Right? Is there something that you find meaning that helps you to carry that hope?
That's a great question. Yeah, I wish you would have let me prepare for that question. So I think it's really like there's two parts to that answer. If I'm being truthful, it's like one, I've often looked at, I think that you'll get lots of defense attorneys who just hate the system. They're like, I would burn down every prison in America and da-da-da. And I got a lot of respect for those people. I tend to disagree. I think they're, tends to be a lot. I tend to frown on bank robbery. I tend to frown on
arson's not something you really encourage.
Yeah, kind of like a well-ordered society. I don't even like texting while driving, but I also like I go to work every day and I take the hits, not because I hate the government, but because I love what's next to me. Like I love that person that's next to me, right? As far as carrying that hope, I think that we have a privileged place within society, and we get maligned. Of course, we get maligned, right? And I think we probably have throughout all of history. But when you think about like the great people who have done our job, right? You could go back right to the founding. You could be like, wow, Alexander Hamilton and John Adams. Whether it's the Boston Massacre, or I forget who did Zissner's trial. I
thought it was Hamilton, right?
Yeah, no, Hamilton did the first murder trial.
Okay.
Yeah, but like I think Zissner, the printing guy who gets the espionage. You had these great patriots who had no problem standing up from that. William Scott Stewart, Lord Erskine, Abraham Lincoln. All of them did criminal defense, and they understood not just the role. And I think that's always diminished when they're like, oh, you have an important role. It's like, I don't have an important role. I have an essential role. And I also have a privileged place, right? When you look at, and Judy Clark, and you look at throughout all of history, Cicero, like all of those people are defending, human beings from the power of the state and like the fury of the mob. And they're willing to go there. Well, we're carrying that hope of that other person in such a privileged way. Now, to your real question was, how do I do it? I think part of it is having that perspective that I believe in a practicing mind, and that I'm often detached from what I'm doing and that I can examine it meaningfully. And I often look at it as the most important thing that's going to resonate is not the result. Clearly, I have to cure the cancer. Like you got to do the surgery, right?
Yep.
Like that's absolutely true. But it's how I've made that person feel. That within this whole sphere of everybody screaming at them, everybody wanting, like to take away their liberty and everything else, that they had within that one true advocate, one true paraclete, one true friend. And that's what I tried. That's how I tried to focus that on. And so like, it is a manifestation of my faith. Maybe it's also like a little bit of just being a good dude, which is not as, like, like as high and mighty as being like this guy who wants to go to heaven, but like just being a good dude. And I want to be a friend to that person.
Yeah.
And I tend to think that almost to a T, every one of my clients would call me their friend. And so long, when you know what the word friend really means and what the etymology of it is and what it truly stands for, then you can look at it and say, yeah, I have the right perspective. Like I have the right mindset that like, I'm coming here as an advocate and as a friend, not as a mercenary, as a hired gun. And I may not always, as a friend, I may not always approve of the choices you did.
Sure.
Like clearly, but like,
yeah.
But as a friend, I will fight for you. And I'm going to fight for you the whole time. And the whole time I will recognize your dignity enough to tell you the truth. And that's often the way I've carried that, is to have that, I think, broaden the aperture and see correctly my relationship with them is not just curing the cancer, but walking with them through this very terrible place. And I thought it was put poetically, like it was the aerodynamics, the arrow of our day not being affected by the aerodynamics of our day. Arrow of our call to the aerodynamics of our day. That's exactly it. Like the arrow of my day is to walk in relationship with another human being who I've been privileged to serve. And the aerodynamics are that I'm not going to let my ego, my own aspirations, my own fears, everything else get in the way, my own desire for money, whatever it might be, get in the way of that true and mighty call.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I've got ego, I have aspirations for money, I have all those, but it's that fear. I mean, and in some ways, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of not being able to help your friend, the fear of not being able to protect your friend. I mean, it's that fear that I'm very proud that thus far I've got up every day and I've shown up again, but it's not easy.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. I think, you have to, do you want me to talk about the breakdown or what?
I mean, that's, I didn't ask, but I will. I will. I know at some point it became overwhelming for you. Mm-hmm. And you had others in your own recognition realize, like, I need to take a pause here. I need to do something different. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was unhealthy in many ways, right? Like, and I still am even to today. Like this week I was like, okay, I got to get this brief done, even though I need to exercise and I need to do the things that I need to do, right? I had my prayer time, but I didn't do what I was supposed to do. Like, okay, well, 2 days, like you miss 1 day, that's nothing. 2 days, it's the beginning of a new habit. Well, I'd missed like maybe 8 years. So I was like, I wasn't doing the things I needed to do that were going to help me. And I've been very forthright about my breakdown, mostly because I think that most people are on the verge of one. And like they're not willing to. And when I did have my breakdown, it was a great moment. So what happened was we had thought my son was going to be blind, and his head had formed, but the brain was still growing. And so like the effect of that was going to be blindness, mental delays. I can't remember the correct term nowadays. All these other problems, lifelong. And so I just repressed it. I'm like, look, I just got to soldier on. It's the pandemic. I got to remove this cancer. I got to remove this cancer. I got to remove this cancer. And I just worked and worked. And I remember I was we won a big case. Albie had won it. And I was there at the party and I saw what a 14-month-old or 18-month-old is supposed to be able to do. And my son could do none of that. And just something cracked. And I remember driving to my parents' house and I started crying. And I was like, oh, that's not right.
Yeah.
Let's just push that down a little bit deeper. Yeah. just like Ricky Bobby. Let's put it down just a little bit deeper. Waited 3 weeks and it was just a Friday afternoon. And I was just in my driveway and I just started crying. And it had been a difficult day in court, but nothing, unheard of. I told my wife something's not right. And then by Sunday, it was just the floodgates were open. And I realized I was so it's kind of back to your point, Aaron, about the fear and the caring. I had this one client, Balarua Nori, completely innocent. He was facing a 30-year mandatory minimum.
Yeah.
And
he was an immigrant, right?
Yeah, he was from Afghanistan as part of the Afghan airlift, wrongfully accused of rape, 30-year mandatory minimum. We'd then be sent back to the Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, and I was completely convinced of his innocence. That and a few other cases were just weighing me down. And I was supposed to go back to back. It was going to be I might be making this up. I might be wrong. Mac would know. It was a 2-week trial and then an 8-week trial right after that. Within and that was just, you're working all the time and just terrible. And I just broke. I couldn't do it. And Alves was incredible. He gave me, 2 weeks off. He's like, you get to 2 months, 2 years, I wouldn't care. Whatever you need to get well. And I just took the time I worked out every day. I lost a good 14 ounces. And I went and did optimal work. I learned about optimal work, which I've written about. But I also just sort of recalibrated. And I just said, I'm going to be home at 5, maybe 5:30. I'm going to put away my cell phone. I'm going to do what I need to within the confines of the day I have. And I really started to focus on mindfulness and recalibrating my goals, where I was caught up in the ego of the job. And even though I've spoken with, I hope, great passion, but also with higher aspirational goals, at the time it was more mercenary of I want that award or I want that recognition. And I wouldn't say it to a perversion of it where I was that was all I was doing, but
Sure.
It was motivating.
And at the end of the day, sometimes if that's what's motivating you to get the results for your friend, for these other people, there's it's parallel play, right? And correct. So and maybe some of that is just, that's what we can rationalize. Maybe it's even me right now rationalizing that.
Well, I think you always have a little bit of mixed motivations. Mine were a little bit too far over, if I'm being honest, right? And I gave a very serious examination, sort of like Solzhenitsyn says, where he goes through and just looks honestly, just brutal honesty. And I said, I don't like what I see. I like some things, right? I don't like others. And I still fail. I still fail in relationships. I still fail in presentation. I still fail in many levels, in many regards. But I gave myself that honest examination. And then I tried to rebuild. And I just rebuilt by going out with the attorneys who I respected most. And I'd say that almost to a T, there were a few that were like, I don't know if you're going to be able to come back. Bro, you broke so bad that I don't think you should go and rethink a new career. And I was like, whoa.
In a world in which our entire premise is based on redemption and...
Well, it wasn't, I don't think it was that it was... it wasn't, I engaged in anything scandalous, right? I don't even drink. But
was it more of just they were more worried about your fragility?
That's it. Yeah. They were like, dude, you're too fragile. You can't go back into the furnace. And they talked about that. Guys will talk about touching the stove and you're not able to touch it again, right?
Sure.
It hurt too deeply. That haunted me a little bit, and I was like, oh my gosh. And the best thing that ever happened to me was I came back and I had this case I did not want to do. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a heavy case. It was in the 7th Circuit. And so I asked everybody in the firm to do it for me. And to a T, they were all like, oh, I would love to. But unfortunately, I have these T-Rex arms and I cannot pick that up. And I think Alves would have done it. Alves would have definitely done it. But I didn't want to impose upon him. I think he was getting ready for trial. And so I had to do it. And I walked in there thinking, reverberating in my brain was, you're too fragile. You're too fragile. I was like, I don't think I am, but maybe I am. Maybe I am. And the first question, I was like, boom, right back. And I was like, and it was just so much stronger, and I was in such a better place. But so that's the story. But the real lesson of it was not like, oh, great, that's great success. But it was that I realized the focus had to be different. And part of that's just middle age, where you realize you can't work like you used to.
Yeah.
And also that what you used to value, you shouldn't value. And that what you need to value is that which is closest to you. And so I really tried to focus on the relationships and seeing that the bonds were more important than anything. And that's part of with like the friendship, but also the friendship with my colleagues. And I tried to pour it out myself out into my interns, into my, like my other coworkers, and sometimes with great success, sometimes not.
Yeah. But you use the word fragile and strong.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? I mean, you're too fragile. I mean, as you were telling the story, there's a part of me that's, maybe it's just the contrarian in me and says, maybe all of us need to be that fragile. Maybe all of us just need to recognize the fragility of all of us. And you, as you often are, were a leader in that regard. And I'm not poking, but I mean, like, that's part of who we have to be.
Yeah, I think you have to be honest. Like, I think that's when you put on the false airs. I think that's a real big, that's a problem within our profession, but I think even within the world. No, I think it was good to be fragile, and it's good to be open about it. I think, I never shy. I made a choice. I can't remember what day I did or when it was, but I was like, I'm not going to hide from this. And in fact, I'm going to write about it. And so I wrote that article, and I was like, this is a good thing to be honest with people. And I remember, at first nobody really knew why I left. They were like, Bugni just didn't show up for work for 2 weeks. I mean, Craig had, said like, he's got some medical thing. And they're all like, oh my gosh, is it cancer?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, actually I had a nervous breakdown. Everybody was like, whoa. Like you just,
I mean, where people, I mean, you even when you say that now, all kinds of images, I'm sure, come into my head. Yeah. Maybe the viewers or watchers of, the listeners of this will come into it. I mean, you're leaning into that word.
Yeah. Look, I cried. I cried a ton, and I cried over and over again. And even like talking about it, like those first days, I've never wept so hard. And I remember going out to see a priest friend of mine, and he told me like, you should see yourself as almost as a sculpture, and that you're constantly being refined, and the Lord is taking like a little chisel to you, and sometimes a sandpaper, and you're conforming to the image that you're supposed to be. He just took a sledgehammer, like a very big chisel, and that piece just broke off. And I remember being like, whoa, that piece hurt. Yeah. And it was sort of like which I think I aspired to, which was, and I don't even know, it was like sort of an amorphous aspiration of grandeur, because I wasn't really thinking money. Like I remember the first time, like when I decided I had to leave the federal defender because we didn't have any money. I went out and like said like, hey, I'd like to go join a firm. And they told me what it was. And I was like, what? I like went home to my wife. She was like, no way. Like we could go out to dinner like once a week. Like this is incredible. And I was like, yeah. It wasn't like this sense of grandeur or the sense of accomplishment, but it was something maybe I didn't even know what I was aspiring to, but it was something other than sincerity. And that's what I really tried to come to, is like, I'm just really coming at things from a place of sincerity and really a place of love. And so long as those are my two motivations and I'm driving towards that, then the success is really defined by those two characteristics, not upon any wall or anything. I don't keep anything on my walls. I don't do, like, I have a picture of my kids drew. It's an alligator. But like, other than that, like there's not much.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's been the reorientation. Yeah.
How much community, just to, when you had that breakdown and to have a community within your office, obviously you have family and you have faith, but just to right now talk about the criminal defense community, how important was that for you to have that to lean on, to reach out for, to,
It
was this so personal in that moment that it?
No, I want to say like, so I've really struggled in some ways of recent with like the criminal defense community. So I think there were definitely people that I could rely upon. Like Nate Otis was excellent, and Craig Albee was just the greatest man who's ever lived. In my, like not at greatest, but he's a very great man who was a great influence on me. There were others who didn't know what to do,
Sure.
and I think that revealed a lot. But then Kathleen Quinn was tremendous. She was the one actually, she was like, look, you got to be like the Stoics. You got to remove the cancer, but ultimately you have to decide what is it that you can do within this job, and you have to live outside this job in some ways. And I was like, oh, that's really helpful. Guy Cardamone and a few others, like I recall going out with them and getting that, but I've never been a Jenna's, which is a popular bar. And,
You're not a drinker.
yeah. Well, but also like, I think I hope any lawyer who knows me would know me as the kind of lawyer that you could always call for a walk, that would spend like 2 hours with you to talk it through.
Yeah.
But my sense of humor doesn't really lend itself to Jenna's, and like I don't really have the same cool stories and everything else.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, just whether it's Jenna's or any other bar, they tend to be egocentric stories, right? Or in some ways, stories about our clients as objects of something as opposed to humans.
That's right. That's right. And look, there are some excellent lawyers that go to Jenna's, like Tracy Lencioni and Madison is just a tremendous attorney, and Merle Josty. So like, it's not to that, but like, I just never really fit in as well. And I kind of always wished I had. But the criminal defense community, I think what was greatest was, I remember Jessa going, because she and I were in the same building, and going down and talking to her and Nate. And there was no judgment. And that was what was cool, was there was just empathy. And when there's a place of empathy, it really doesn't matter where it's from.
Sure.
But like, that you're seen, and that you're received in that way. But I think there was also like this deeper sense where the criminal defense community, I think, was in many ways glad. I don't mean like glad in like a schadenfreude kind of sense, but like glad that it did happen to me, because I think most of them are on the same brink.
Well, that's what I worry, not in the sense of glad, but just in the sense of like, oh shit, that happened to Joe, that could happen to me.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like that's, it could be a wake up call.
Yeah.
It could be just, I'm burying my head in the sand even deeper. I'm trying to distance. I'm trying to like, well, this is why it happened to Joe. This is why it happened to Joe. I'm different.
Yeah.
But we're all like right on that fucking edge.
Right on that edge, man. And so many people have reached out, and I've gone out for coffee with them, or taking them out for long walks or dinner, where it was beautiful. Like even like district attorneys' wives had read the story, and like lawyers in Detroit and California, and had read the article, and they were like, that's me. And like, can you talk to me about this? Or what did you do? And so I think like in some sense, it gives permission to people to talk about like how sad they are.
Yeah.
And then also to have somebody else who they know, I'm not going to judge them. And instead I'm going to be like, oh man, like just a big hug. Just a big hug. Like, hey, I wanted to get a t-shirt that says everybody just needs a hug. Which I do feel like that's like so true.
Yeah, absolutely. You said you went down and you were in the same office as Jessa and Nate, and it was a place you didn't feel judged, right? Yeah. And I feel like that's one of the strengths that some of us within the criminal defense, it really is a place where you're the person that's coming in next to you. It's almost a completely different mindset than everybody else in the criminal justice system, because we're actually not judging them, right? I'm just like, once you get to that space that you can do that with the person next to you, it helps me in the rest of my world. Yeah. I don't know without this job. I feel like I can do that in my job. And because I can do that in my job, I am such a better human outside of my job, because that's what my job has taught me.
Absolutely.
Right? Absolutely. So to close, what do you think our community of criminal defense, if there was one, again, I know it's not a bit of advice that you can just do one little thing, but what's the last message you'd like to share with our community?
That's a tough one. Anna did not prepare me for that one. I think goes back to, well, twofold, if I can give you two instead of one.
Absolutely.
One is to find a mentor. I think there are out there. I think some people, there is a great poverty of it, mostly because people don't want to invest in it. But I think go out and try to find them. Go find the Mike Cohns, the Steve Meyers, go find the Steve Hurleys, and just go and find somebody that you can invest in and who will invest in you. I think that's number one. But there's a great line by, I think it's Socrates or Plato, because Socrates didn't write it. But he's like, spend your time, reading the works of others so that you can gain like quickly and easily what they fought so difficultly for. And it really comes down to continual improvement through reading. I'm always amazed how many criminal defense attorneys don't read.
Oh,
tell me about it.
No, I mean, I think, there's obviously we're surrounded by books here. Cause we're in a library.
Yes.
I love books, you'll be getting some books on your trip out of here. And the criminal defense books, I think, are essential, but just reading, just reading novels. I mean, I love nothing more than to go home on a Saturday and sit down on the couch and, read a couple of hours in a book. Just take me away into another world, get yourself inside the shoes of another human being. I mean, that's where you learn empathy.
Yes.
That's the best way to learn empathy, is to read. And that's what we need more than anything, I think, in our job, is to like empathy, to live, see, hear what other people have to say in their life.
And other people have dealt with the same struggle as you and I have. Other people have had nervous breakdowns and difficulties and transitions and financial woes. And criminal defense attorneys and priests and social workers and everyone have borne the burdens of a broken society.
Yeah.
Right. I know that there's a great book called The Art of Advocacy.
And it's right over here.
Oh, great.
It's right there.
Oh, right there. All right.
Yeah. You recommended it to me, and in honoring the mentor, I read it. It's fantastic.
Isn't it fantastic? Like, there's this great line in there about reading, and about Martin Littleton, who'd been like, the great, the Clarence Darrow before Clarence Darrow.
Sure.
And the guy, it was Littleton's mentor who wrote that book. Stryker was Littleton's mentor or mentee. And he says, I forgot the exact line, but he lived in two worlds. He lived within the lives of New York City every day, and in the pages of Les Miserables. For there he found empathy and humanity at its best and at its worst. And you're like, whoa, like here's a guy who's at the top of his game. He's rereading Les Mis to understand more and more who we are. And that's I think, so I think for everybody I mentor, I try to get them to read books, because you're going to get a little bit better. And it's sort of, if you look at it as continual improvement and that you're trying to constantly get a little bit better, the victories come when you start doing, you start reading Your Witness and you're like, oh, I can cross on that.
Yeah.
Or you start thinking about it as McCarthy on cross, or fearless cross-examination, or McComas on trial strategy. And you're like, okay, I got to think of this case differently. Because if you keep on staying within the rut of you and the other lawyer you're office sharing with, or you and the two people that you happen to brainstorm with, that's such a small universe.
We got to take risks. We got to take risks in our world. We're going to lose all the time.
Yes.
And the only way to learn those new paths is to read about the old paths.
Yeah. I mean, I hope you do one with Keith Belzer, because no,
absolutely.
I still remember going up here. I was thinking about Belzer. I was telling Caitlin about Belzer and how at NCDC, as a law clerk, I was there. I remember him giving the talk on, I think it's Hondo or something, like the dog, and the
Wolfen.
Wolfen, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, circumstantial evidence and...
Oh, man. Powerful. But that was a guy who read. And I remember him talking about him using theater, using all these things, and he was growing beyond the confines of what the law imposed upon him. What like the legal education, the expectation of just a dutiful lawyer. Like, that's a true artist. Yeah. Like, Belzer's a true artist. Albee is a true artist. Like, they're growing beyond that, and they're able to do something that is truly remarkable because their aperture has grown, because their skills have grown, because they've read deeply. Yeah.
So let me just end on this. You'd said reading, right?
Yeah.
And so let me just read to you from Abraham Lincoln and the Structure of Reason. And this is a letter that President Lincoln wrote to somebody. If you wish to be a lawyer, attach no consequence to the place you are in or the person you are with, but get books. Sit down anywhere and go to reading for yourself. That will make a lawyer for you quicker than any other way.
Amen. Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Well,
Thanks for bringing all your books that you've read and everything in your head and, more importantly, everything in your heart, man.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for all you do. And I'm looking forward to the great success of this podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Sanctuary in the Jungle. This episode was brought to you by Nelson Defense Group and Made Daily. We'll see you next time for another episode. Until then, stay strong and carry the hope.